Hey everybody, this is Jason with the Landlord Launch, and I want to welcome you back to our course. And today we're going to be talking about the move-in process, and we're going to take a look at some of the forms that we can use during the move-in process, what the steps are in the move-in process, basically everything move-in process in today's session here. So let's jump right in and see what we have going on for us today. Okay, so what we're going to be covering in this section, we are going to go through and utilize the move-in checklist, which is a tool and a form that I use to kind of help make sure that I stay on track, make sure that, basically what it is the move-in process in checklist form. That way I can apply those. It's like an action list almost of the things I need to do in the process to make sure that I'm getting everything I need to get done. And then at the same time, it is also a way for me to make sure that my move-ins are consistent. And if along the way, something pops up to where I want to improve the process, I utilize it for that as well. And I think we jump in that just a little bit more when we dig into that checklist. We're also going to be looking at some other tools like the new resident welcome letter, the move-in move-out inspection. We are going to take a deep dive into the lease agreement, look at some of the terms in there, talk about some of the things you can do, talk about some of the things that you can do differently if you want to. Again, with the main goal being finding a process and an approach that works for you and your business. And then as we move through the rest of the section, we're going to look at some of the more common lease addendums, the ones that I use at least, and then what a sample move-in packet looks like, and then pretty much how to finalize that move-in, what the execution side of that looks like, getting the signatures, turning over possession to the tenants, the future tenants. Okay, so here is a copy of the move-in checklist, or at least a screenshot of the move-in checklist. And again, this is a checklist that allows us to turn our process into a list of action items so that we can execute this in a consistent manner from move-in to move-in, and make sure that we are able to improve our process over time as well. Like I talked about before, if there's something that pops up and you're like, yeah, I think I want to do that. I think it'd be a good idea if I started checking this, or if I started doing this, or if I started asking for this, or got this filled out, or whatever that may be. It's simple. You just add it to your checklist here, and then on the next move-in, you'll make sure to remember to do that. And let's just take a quick look here. Like I said, this is a pretty good picture, but let me just drag over the actual form right now. So, when I get an approved application and I know somebody's going to be moving in, this is the first thing I pull up, and I put the applicant's name in, or the people who are moving in's names in, put the property address, and I put the proposed move-in date, because again, I want to, that move-in date is kind of our deadline. It also determines some other things. I have move-in scheduled here as our first item, but that's important because, your prorated rents, when they're going to move in, preparing all that move-in paperwork are all kind of based around that. But again, we're going to go through each of these steps to one degree or another as we go through our video today, our session today. But this is just a quick snapshot of what this looks like. And this is a one-page one. But again, if your process grows out of this into 2 or 3 pages, hopefully it's not 3 pages, but put in here what you think you need to do to make sure that your process is executed the way that you want it to. Again, this whole thing's about improving your business and customizing these forms and these tools to make sure they work for you. Okay, so jumping right in. So as you can see, the first 3 things here are move-in schedule, security deposit received, move-in gift, place, and home. Like we talked about, or like I said in the last slide, the move-in date's important. It determines your prorated rents. It determines your kind of deadline, how long you have to get all this stuff set up. A lot of your lease paperwork and move-in paperwork needs that move-in date, to finalize that. And then your again, it's just good to know. Oops, what am I doing? Hitting the wrong buttons here. Sorry about that. All right. The next thing I put on there is to just double check and make sure that I have in fact received the security deposit. If not, then I'm going to be calling them to get that, because if they're approved and I'm going to hold this unit for them, they need to put that deposit down as soon as possible. If you, as part of your move-in criteria, you require the deposit or a portion of the deposit down to even hold the unit before you screen the applicant. Perhaps you already have this, perhaps this is collect the second half of the deposit, but whatever this is, just to ensure that I don't let that security deposit slip through, because that is important. And then the third step, or the third item on here, is the move-in gift placed in home. Now, I think it's on the, here we go. So I like move-in gifts. As you'll see kind of in the retention section as well, it helps us form a relationship with that resident. I take these, and again, there's some ideas, some pictures here, but these can be anything, you know, I mean, you could throw, I mean, it could be as simple as a couple bottles of water, a couple granola bars, and you know, a thank you card, you know, for choosing your home or whatever else. But the point being is that you're spending a little time, you're putting a little thought and effort, and you're welcoming that family into your home, and it builds that retention. It builds the retention efforts. It builds the relationship, and it just starts the relationship on the right foot. Again, here's a couple samples, but if you need ideas, just Google, just say move-in gift ideas, or go to Pinterest. There's a lot of them there. And like I said, it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, it could be really simple. You know, if you like things like candles or little plants or whatever else, that's fine too. But do what you want to do in terms of your comfort level, how much you want to spend. It's the thought that really counts here at this point. And if you don't want to do a move-in gift, that's fine too. But I have found it to be a useful thing to do in my experience. Okay, the next item on the list here is the move-in inspection and getting those pictures or other backup documents. So the move-in, move-out inspection, this is used to document the condition of the property at move-in, and this is pretty important because, one, in a lot of states, you actually have to be able to prove, if you're going to charge a security deposit, you have to be able to prove the condition at move-in and versus the condition at move-out, so you can show that, you know, that tenant during their occupancy damaged those items while they live there. So the traditional approach is the written move-in, move-out. And let's pull over just a bigger version here, because again, that's a screenshot, but this is a pretty it's a pretty big document, actually, a pretty comprehensive document. So the way this works is that you go in, you put the future resident's name in and address, city, zip, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to go through each section, and we are going to document whether this is satisfactory or unsatisfactory. And unsatisfactory just basically means that, you know, there's an issue of some sort that you want to make sure to document so that you do not charge the resident at move out when that time comes. And if you notice, this side is all move in, and then this side over here is all move out. So we're going to do this left side, and we're just simply going to go through each section, and we are going to document the condition of each of these items. Now, if there's something you want to write on there, or if you want to, you know, when you download this, if you want to come in here and completely change some of these, add some things, remove some things, again, that's the whole point of this. It's a resource document for you to use and to customize for your business. But again, we got exterior, we got grounds, front entry, garage, carport, storage. Storage is a good one because a lot of times people don't really pay attention to a lot of that, and I've seen storage units get, you know, storage sheds get damaged, water gets in there, not paying attention, mold starts to grow, things along those lines. So make sure not to forget that. Living room, dining room, and just doors, walls, ceiling, floors. So again, if it's fine, put an S in there, move on. If there's something on there, let's say that there's, I don't know, hopefully this is fixed, but just for this example, let's just say that it's unsatisfactory. There's a small hole in the door, and you want to document that so you don't charge the resident when they move out for that damage. Or a better one is maybe there's a stain on the carpet, something along those lines. All right, let's pull back over here. Now, the traditional kind of way of doing this is, and in some states I think they even say, hey, you have to do it this way, but the traditional kind of way of doing this is you meet the resident on site and then you go through this with them. I've never really liked that. Even the time where the resident wanted to be present, I would go early. I would complete the inspection and then I would show them what I've found and then say, okay, why don't you go on and walk through and let me know if we need to update anything. The reason being is because if you're there trying to do this and you have a resident following you around, they're going to be chatting in your ear the whole time. They're going to be asking you questions. It's really going to slow you down. This is a long enough process as it is. I mean, you can get through it fairly quickly, but if you have to stop and answer questions, have conversations, perhaps you're not paying attention or focused the way that you should be on the documentation because they're talking to you. Again, I just like doing it alone. So usually what I do is I go in ahead of time and I complete the move-in, and then I'll take photos or videos or whatever else, which we'll talk about in a minute, to document so I can get a baseline of what that actually looks like and back up what I'm writing down. And then I include this in my lease signing, and I say, okay, I did a move-in inspection. This is everything I found. Here's the photographs that I found. Go on and review this, sign this, take a copy with you, and then you have 5 days to return this to me if there are any updates that you want to add. If everything's good and if you agree with this, you don't have to do anything. If you send it with them unsigned, it is extremely difficult, I have found, to get that back. And then typically you're chasing them down. It's not a priority for them. And then in some states, I think like Kansas, if you don't get this back within 5 days of move-in, then it's not valid. So that's why I always have them sign it and review it. And then when they come back, if there's anything that they need to add to it, I'll add it. If it's legitimate, I'll add it for sure. I don't ever give anybody any grief. And usually though, with the pictures and the walkthrough, I'm usually pretty thorough. There's not much that I've seen that people actually add, and the stuff they did add was really minor, kind of nitpicky stuff, but that's okay too. It didn't make a difference, so why not? But again, at least in Kansas is 5 days. Your state may be a little different. Make sure to know what that time return is. And then if they insist on being there with you, that's fine, but I still go ahead of time and I knock it out, and then when they show up, then I let them do it from there. And if you want to show up and if you want to walk through this with them and do it, that's fine too. That doesn't matter, but that's just a couple different ways I approach it that makes this go a little bit quicker. That may help you when you do this for yourself. So, like I was telling you, I like to take photos, and the way that I do this is I'll go into a room and I'll basically grab a photo from each corner of the room. If there's any damage, I'll absolutely capture that. If I'm documenting, I'll capture that specifically. But really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get every angle. I'll take pictures of the appliances. I'll take pictures of like the fireplace if there's a fireplace. But in these, my move-in pictures, I'll usually have, 30 or 40 of them. And the point being is I want to have pictures of every angle so that if it ever comes time to have to show the court or even the resident to justify the charges, I can show, hey, here's the picture of this countertop, and at this point in time, it wasn't cracked. You moved in. Here's the move-out picture. There's the crack, clear as day. Sorry, I have to charge you for it. So again, it's establishing that before and after. And pictures, in most places, I don't even think they're really required. They're not mandatory, but it eliminates the he said, she said type dilemma. Yeah, even if they sign off on the move-in inspection, and especially the way that I do it, because as you can imagine, that tenant could say, oh, well, they just had me sign this at the move-in or at the lease. I never actually looked at any of this stuff, so therefore I shouldn't be charged. But if they have a copy of these pictures, then it's hard for them to make that argument. So there's on the photos, I've done it a couple different ways. One, I've just kept the photos and put them in a safe digital folder and stored them that way. But what I also like to do personally is I'll use something like those photo template and I'll drag them over. And like this Word doc, when you pull it down, it actually has like the placeholders in there, so you just drag the photos in. It's actually not that time consuming of a process. But this will be, I mean, there's what, 12 spots on there, so you get 30-40 photos on there. It's maybe 4 or 5 pages. But when they get that move-in inspection with 3-4 pages of the photos and everything else on there, pretty safe to say that I did a thorough inspection. I have things very well documented, and it eliminates their ability to even make claims, because they can go back to this later on, and if they say, well, this was damaged when I moved in, if they have this, they're really not gonna say something like that. So you can use the photo template. You can just upload it if you don't want to do the photo thing and give them the photos. You just want them for your own. I've done that too. I just needed to just make sure that you keep them in a safe place so that you can go back and access them if you ever need to. And then another thing you can do, and a lot of people do, is videos. They'll go around and they'll take their phone or whatever and they'll video document everything. And that's okay. What I found though is it's a little, I don't know, I always feel like that I'm going to miss something on the videos, and at least with the pictures. I just go to each corner of the room and I take, wide shots, and you can capture pretty much everything. Are you going to get a hairline crack? No, you're not going to get that much detail, but you would probably miss that in the video as well. So for me, the still shots just seem a lot better, and it also allows me to focus on the damage. Plus, if you go into court with a video and you're trying to fast forward this and show somebody on a phone or whatever where this damage is, that can be a little problematic, depending on a lot of different factors. That's why I like photos, but video is perfectly acceptable as well. I don't want you to steer away from that. If that's your preference, and by all means, do that. They also have inspection apps too, and so what these inspection apps are basically doing exactly what we're doing with the move-in, move-out inspection and the photos, except the difference is, it's an app. It's built in on your phone to document the condition right there on your phone, and then snap a picture of that item that you're looking at. And then, usually they generate some sort of PDF report that gets emailed off to you, and they're nice reports. The biggest thing about the inspection apps is, if we only have one home, they cost money, and we're only doing maybe 1 or 2 of these type of inspections a year. Really, I guess you could use it for your quarterly inspections, maybe a couple other things, but usually I found that the cost does not justify having it. Those inspection apps are generally geared towards like apartment communities and property management companies. They are nice. I've used them. They do make things a little quicker, and I do like the reports are generated. But again, if you want to spend the money, then by all means, check them out. There's a lot of them out there. I just personally, I found it just easier to, use the written inspection checklist and the photo template. Okay, so the next couple items on here on the move-in checklist, again, pictures uploaded to server, which we just kind of talked about. If you use a lockbox or a sign, you're going to want to remind yourself to remove those, because those things cost money, and good ones are a little pricey to replace. I mean, if you invest in like a good lockbox and a good sign that you can reuse, you can use those for years and years and years. The last thing you want to do is forget it at a property and maybe it gets knocked over, maybe it gets stolen or whatever else. So I have that on there to pick up. I'm going to prepare the keys ahead of time. I'm going to go to a hardware store. I'm going to have them cut. I'm going to prepare one set of keys for each adult that's going to be living in the home. Then I'm going to go to the home and I'm going to test those keys and make sure that those work. And that way there's no issues that move in there. Okay, and then the next item on my list here is the welcome letter and folder prepared. So let's take a look at the welcome letter. The welcome letter, I was going to pull this right now. Let's see what our next slide says here. Let me see if there's anything I'm supposed to address before we look at it. Okay, well, let's just talk about this here. So this is part of the new move-in paperwork, and basically how I use it is I use it to kind of, I go through the lease agreement, but this is kind of reinforcing the important parts of that lease agreement that I want to make sure stick out in their mind. So it's kind of like hitting them again, maybe re-explaining it in a different kind of way. And again, this is delivered when they move in with the move-in packet, with their lease paperwork, with any of the extra stuff that I'm going to include in the packet. Let's just kind of take a look at this here. So that's just kind of a cover page. And again, you can use as much or as little of this as you would like. Got a table of contents here, and just a little welcome. This is, I use this one for the property management, but you can use this for your individual rental very easily. You just go through and change the verbiage. But thank you for choosing J. Scott Properties for your housing needs. It's just a little introduction welcome. So first off, contact information. Want to give them their website. Want to give them email, telephone numbers, address where they can. This is just a rent drop-off address for me, but address where they can find me at, theoretically. If you just own a property, one house, and you're just managing it yourself, which I think a lot of you watching this probably are, I would not put your home address on here. You don't need a drop box. You don't need to have an address. Matter of fact, I'd recommend for rent that everything get pushed through online access or some sort of digital payments personally. If you can get an auto pay, even better. But my next thing here is I do use a property management software, and this is instructions on how to access that online software. And I like portals. I like the customer portals because, again, they can go in, they can look at their tenant ledgers, they can submit work orders, they can see what the status of work orders are, they can look at old work orders to see what the conclusions are if they're ever interested, and they can pay their rent. I can upload their lease agreement and their move-in paperwork, all the signed copies of that, and they can go in and view those at any time and download it. Again, I use Buildium, which is more of a full-blown property management software, but the services like Turbo Tenant and Apartments.com and maybe Avail is in there as well. I just don't know how much they have in terms of uploading forms and stuff like that. Ready Rent, things along those lines. They should have that online access to where you can upload documents for them. I touch on rent again. So in this one here, I say rent's due on the first of the month. We give you a 4-day grace period, and then on the 6th day, if we have not received rent, this is what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be late. I'm gonna apply late fees. Make payments to acceptable methods of payment or credit or debit card, money order, personal check. With the property management company, that's fine. But as an individual landlord, I wouldn't accept checks, and I don't even like credit card. I'd turn credit card options off and only accept ACH because they can cancel those. I don't like cash either because you can't trace it. And the last thing I want to do is get into a dispute on them saying they paid me this much when I know they paid me something else. And if they do it digitally, electronically, there's no dispute. It's right there. There's records of it. Records that I can't manipulate. It's very, very cut and dry. Okay. This is just saying it can be paid by the portal. Again, I'm just hitting all of the important things and giving them information that I think is important on how to pay rent. Make sure if you're using a money order, put your name and address on there. You could not imagine how many times I got money orders in the Dropbox and they're completely blank. I had no idea who to apply them to. Okay, we go through some of the more important policies here. I talk about the rental agreement, security deposits, animals. These are all the same things that are in the lease agreement as well. But again, I'm just touching on them. And a lot of times what I'll do, as you'll see when we talk about this, is I'll send the lease agreement and everything else digitally to them for them to review. So when I do the move-in, all I'll do is I'll hit this move-in welcome letter and I'll just highlight these things and talk to them about these specific items because these are the more important ones to me. And then if they have questions on their lease that they signed digitally and returned, then we can answer those as well. But a lot of times, if I'm not necessarily explaining a lease term for term to them. They've had a chance to review it, they've signed it, they've returned it. I'm hitting them with this on move-in day. So it's reinforcing those things that I think are important that I want them to know. Because again, I'm communicating my expectations with them. Keys. Let's see here. Well, I think I have it down here that lockouts basically you need to call a locksmith. I don't want to do after hours emergencies. But just going through terms, maintenance requests. How can you submit maintenance requests? Go to your portal, call it in, which is where most emergencies come in, is via phone call, or you can email it to info@rentjscott.com. You know, if you want to do email, if you want to force them all into taking it to a portal, great, do that. I mean, that's the easiest way. They go to their portal, keeps them in the portal, keeps them active, and again creates that spot to where you can have that communication back and forth, and everything's documented along the way. I really like resident portals. If you have the opportunity to use one, I highly recommend it. Let's see here. I'm just kind of breezing through this. Of course, you can download and read through. And again, change this stuff that doesn't apply to you. Make it your own. This is an important one, emergency maintenance request. Generally, what I tell them is emergency to me is, I always say, fire, flood, or blood. And if it's in the middle of summer and above a certain temperature, I do consider ACs, and under a certain temperature, I do consider heat. But if it's not those, generally speaking, it can wait to the next business day, and I don't consider it an after-hours emergency. And I kind of set this again as my expectation. If there's multiple bathrooms, as long as there's no active leak going on, if a toilet's not working but there's no active leak and they have another bathroom they can use, it's not an emergency. It can wait till the next day. We'll get somebody over there and get you taken care of. It's a priority, but not an emergency. I don't want to spend, if nothing else, I don't want to spend the money for an after-hours call for a plumber when it'd be significantly less the next day during normal business hours. After-hours lockouts, this is what I was talking about. Call a locksmith. One of the things I do to kind of help with this as well is I generally don't put locking knobs on. I'll just put deadbolts, and that eliminates those accidental lockouts. Yes, they can still lose a key if they're out and about and lose their keys and they can't get in or something like that, but what I was running into there for a while when I used locking handsets was they would like go out to take the trash and they didn't realize the door was locked, and then now they're locked out of their home and stuff like that. So eliminated all of that. But yeah, that's just a quick overview of the welcome letter. And again, I don't send this out. This is basically the first thing that's in that move-in packet, which you'll see when we get to kind of how that's all laid out and everything. And then when I do turn over the keys or whatever, I'll pull this out and, you know, go over some of these items and make sure they understand, make sure they don't have any questions over it. So it's basically a condensed version of the important parts of the lease agreement. All right, let's see what is next here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, per the checklist, per the process, is I'm going to prepare the new move-in paperwork. And that is going to be basically your lease agreement, all the addendums. I'm going to get it all, you know, set up. I'm going to get the dates. I'm going to make sure I have the dates. I'm going to get the prorated rents figured out, and I'm going to set that up. So let's jump in here, and we are going to dive in and really talk about a lot of the provisions in here and just kind of review some things. I think out of everything, the residential lease agreement is, of course, the most important part, because this is the main document that protects you. Okay, so first off, this is a sample lease agreement. It's actually a pretty solid lease agreement. You could probably use this in most places. I would always recommend that you have an attorney put their eyes on it, make sure there's not any state-specific verbiage needs to go in here, or make sure that there's not provisions that aren't allowed in your state. That's always a great idea. I mean, a little bit of money on the front end can save you a lot of heartache later. But overall, this sample residential lease agreement, although I have it labeled as a Kansas lease agreement. It's pretty solid. Now, within the Forms Vault, I also have state-specific lease agreements that they're a basic template, and but you can take a look at them. You can see if it works for you, if there's any provisions you want to add. A lot of them do have the state-specific verbiage in there if it's required. Pull over if there's other provisions you've seen somewhere else or things you want to address within a lease agreement, then pull them over in a lease agreement, put them in, have it all set up, have a set of legal eyes on it real quick, make sure it's good to go, and then start using that from that point forward. Again, once you do that, it's you don't have to update that all the time. Very rarely did my lease agreement change over the years. There was new stuff every once in a while that popped on, or things we ran into that I wanted to address, and then I would update it. But in terms of the state laws specifically on that, it didn't really change a whole bunch. I mean, these things have been, property management rules, landlord tenant law, thing along those lines. It's not a constantly evolving deal. There are additions from time to time, but it's not changing 24/7. This stuff is pretty settled information out there. So most lease agreements, all lease agreements, they are going to have kind of the basic terms. When did this start? What are the dates? Who is it between? The owner, which would be you, and the tenant, which would be the person that is renting, and then the dwelling located at, you put the property address in. All lease agreements are going to have the term. Now this one, let's see here. Yeah, now so this one is set up to where you can have basically a prorated period in there. All my leases start on the first of the month and end on the last of a month. So let's just say this is May 15th. So if it's May 15th when I'm doing the lease signing paperwork, my lease is going to start June 1st, and then it'll end May 31st of the following year, if it's a 12-month lease. If it's a 6-month lease, it's still the end of the month, just 6 months. So the term of this lease agreement shall be for 12 months commencing on June 1st, 2023 and ending on May 31st, 2024. Now this is the prorated period I was talking about. If the tenant takes possession prior to the commencement date, which would be June 1st, it is agreed that the tenant will pay a prorated rent in the amount of, and this is where you put your prorated rent in, roughly half if they're moving at the mid-month, and to occupy the premises under these terms beginning May 15th, 2023 until the commencement of the lease. So this is saying your lease is from June 1st to May 31st of 2024. I'm going to give you possession for these 15 days, but everything we talk about today, everything that's in this agreement, everything that you sign is effective immediately. So that is why I have that set up that way, because I don't know, for me, especially with property management, I don't want leases ending all over the month, bouncing around. I really want to kind of control when move-outs are going to occur. So, but I think it's a good practice to get into, even if you are a single-family homeowner that owns and manages just one property. Okay, so of course the lease agreement is going to address the amount of rent. It's going to give, if you have a mailing address, you'd put your mailing address in here. It's going to outline the ways that person can pay. It's going to tell them when that first payment is due. So if they moved in on May 15th, you've accepted the prorate, you have their deposit, all the other monies are collected, the first rental payment is going to be on the first day of June 2023. There and after, a monthly rent shall be due on the first day of each month. So it's establishing how much they're going to, or when that rent is due every single month as they move forward. Concession rent. So this is to outline, and I separate concession rent for a specific reason. The concession rent is basically your move-in specials. If you're giving them a special move-in, and let's just say you're giving them $1,200. Let's say your rent is $1,000 a month, and you're giving them $1,200. I have it set up this way because there's actually different ways that you can give them rent. You could give them, if you say, well, my move-in special, I'll give you $1,200 if you move in by such and such date. You can just give them $1,200 up front, or you can offer them, or you can tell them that I'm going to give you $1,200, but I'm going to take $100 of that each every month, basically reducing your rent $100 a month. So this concession rent section actually allows the structure of that. So here's some examples. Concession for the term of the lease shall be $1,200 to be applied for, if you're going to take it all at once, $1,200 during the month of June. So maybe you're giving the first month, June, to them. If you want to split this up, let's just say you're going to give it to them, you give them $1,200 at the rate of $100 per month during the months of June 2023 through May of 2024. And that way you can outline that you're giving them $100 a month off of there, or as a concession, which will effectively reduce their rent. But here's the important part. If they do not fulfill this lease, you can charge back that concession rent. So let's just use the $1,200 because it's easy. Let's say they're in and they live there for 3 months and they skip on you. Well, you could take this concession rent back and you can charge that to their account, and now this becomes money that they owed, because that concession rent, that move-in special, was contingent on them moving in and fulfilling the terms of the lease, which now they have not done, and now they owe you an additional $1,200. You need to get that back. The collection of that, different story, but at the very least, you have the right to charge that back, and that's why I separate that concession rent out. That's why I don't just reduce the rent. I still say that, it's $1,000 a month, and with a $100 concession, which would make their effective rent $900. But if I just say, I gave you a $1,200 rent concession, but I'm just going to say your rent's $900 a month, that means you can't charge that back, because effectively the rent is $900 if you set it up that way. So the concession rent structure is important if you want the opportunity to charge it back if they skip on you. Security deposit section, again, you're going to outline what your actual security deposit is. This is just the security deposit for the home. It's not going to be the animal deposit. That's addressed somewhere else. Okay, the additional rent and legal action, this is where you get into your late fees and kind of outlining what the eviction process looks like. So let's take a look at this. And don't worry, we're not going to dive into every single one of these sections this deeply, but these are important for you because this is something you need to read through, you need to understand, you need to make sure you have this outlined the way that you want it, that works for you, whatever you decide to do for late fees or these terms and conditions. These are the important ones. Some of this stuff is boilerplate, cookie cutter stuff, but these are the important ones because you want to consider them because they're going to impact you. So, additional rent and legal action. Tenant agrees to pay rent in full and on time on or before the 1st of every month. Tenant agrees to pay as late fees $50 on the 6th, and then $5 per day after that, because that's the way my late fees are structured. We get into this more in the rent collection section too. There's different ways to do this, but that's the way that I have it set up in this particular lease agreement. Late fees will not exceed 50% of the monthly rent charge stated above. That's I think that's a Kansas Landlord Tenant Act deal. Regardless, if you do $50 and $5 a day, you're not gonna. It's a couple $100. It's not going to exceed the amount of rent anyway, but I put the verbiage in there just to kind of reinforce, put the state law verbiage in there. So I also line this out. On the 6th day, if you have not paid, I am going to deliver a 3-day notice to quit, demanding all rents and additional charges are paid by the 9th. So when we talk about the 3-day notice to quit, on the rent collection side and the eviction side, again, you may not have a 3-day, it may be a 5-day, it may be a 7-day, whatever that is, but basically what it's saying is that if that tenant does not pay rent in full within that period, that notice to quit period, and it goes past that, you as a landlord have the right to just not accept rent from that point forward. If you want to go on and just have them leave, then you don't have to accept rent. And that's what this is kind of lining out. It has to be paid by the 9th. After that, it's my discretion on whether or not that lease is going to be reinstated. Of course, I keep that consistent. I have kind of like a rule that I'll reinstate the lease one time in a 6-month period for all tenants, because I want to treat everybody the same, but whatever that is, you can decide what that is. But I'm telling them that if they want to pay by the 9th, I don't have to reinstate this lease. That's my choice. I don't have to accept your rent from that point forward, and if I want to see you gone, then I will make sure that you're gone. I'll run you through the eviction process. This also kind of outlines a little bit here into payment of default, abandonment, breach of contract. This contract shall not terminate. It's just basically saying that they're responsible for the full lease, and I'm going to charge them for every month that's left over in this lease until I either re-rent it or their lease agreement is over. Now, I always charge the rest of the term of the lease until I get it released, and then from there, then I'll give them a credit. But that's just a collection tactic for me that I use. Animals. No animals of any kind shall be permitted on premises without written consent from the owner. Now, we deal with this. You'll see that in this section too. We're going to talk about the animal agreement, the animal lease, animal responsibility agreement, whatever you want to call it. But in the lease itself, no animals. If I choose to accept an animal at a home, there's a separate animal agreement that must be taken care of. So I don't address animals in here. I just say none are allowed. So that basically means if they don't have that animal agreement, they can't produce that animal agreement, it falls back on the lease. The lease says no animals. Okay, so this next section is going over some of the terms or the terms as it resolves around termination of the lease. How can this lease be terminated? So you have the right to terminate a month-to-month tenancy by giving, on this one, at least a 30-day notice before that periodic rent paying date. So I say, and it's said like this, it's structured like this because they have to give notice to vacate in all cases on or before the first of the rent paying month. And that's where it's saying periodic rent paying date, because all rents are due on the 1st. If they turn in notice on the 5th, I'm going to reject it. If they turn it on the 10th, I'm going to reject it. In some cases, if they turn it on the 2nd or 3rd, I'm going to reject it if it falls over a weekend or whatever. But I'm very clear with my tenants over and over and over again. Notice to vacates on or before the 1st of a rent paying month. If they turn it on the 5th, it's not going to be effective till the 1st of the following month, which means they're going to have to pay me one more month's rent. So I'm very clear on that. Most residents I know are going to leave because of the renewal process and the way that I do that. I'm talking to them usually 60, 90 days ahead of time. And so I'm telling them this stuff in advance as well. So none of this stuff is ever a surprise to them. And if they just drag their feet, procrastinate, or forget, and it's the day 5, sorry, we've talked about this 3, 4, 5 times. It's in your lease agreement. I'm sorry, you're going to be responsible for another month. So it is what it is. If tenant breaches any of the conditions set forth in the lease, that's one way to terminate, and it lines it out. In Kansas, there's a 14-day period where they can cure it. So I give them a 1430, which is a lease violation notice that says you have 14 days to fix the situation, and if you don't fix it, then that turns into a 30-day notice to vacate. And then if they fix it one time and violate that same provision again and again, then I don't have to give them another 1430. I'm going to give them a 30-day notice to quit. That's explained in here. It talks about the 3-day notice to pay or quit, which we touched on. If you don't pay rent by the 5th, on the 6th day, a couple things is going to happen. I'm going to start, collection calls on you, at least in this lease agreement. In our rent collection section, I actually don't give a grace period in that example. We just started on the 2nd. But on the 6th, I'm going to give you a notice to quit. I'm going to start collections, and then you're going to start getting late fees. So all those things happen that first day that passes the grace period. And that outlines this here. This goes into more detail about stating that there are damages if they leave before the lease agreement is completed, and that they will be charged until it is released, and that the security deposit may be held to cover some of those charges as well, even if there's not like the physical damage to the property. If I let a lease go month to month, unless I have this provision in here just in case I drop the ball, basically. Again, thinking in terms of property management, if for some reason this slips through the cracks and I don't get a lease renewal signed, at the very minimum, I'm going to start charging them $50 a month for a month-to-month fee. And so if I drop the ball or whatever else, and then they don't want to sign a new lease, and I give them a 30-day notice to vacate, 60-day notice to vacate, to go on and get out, this allows me to go on and start charging them that month-to-month fee without me really having to do anything else, because it's outlined right here in the lease agreement. If tenant leaves or abandons the dwelling prior to the completion of the lease term, tenant will be responsible for paying rent until the expiration of the lease term or until the dwelling has been rented, whichever comes first. Okay. Occupancy standards. So on the rental screening criteria, we outline our occupancy standards, and then I reinforce it here and make sure these match. Screening criteria, it says 2 people per bedroom. This says 2 people per bedroom. So I list on here who the permitted occupants are. It's going to be any of the adults that are on a lease and any of their children. And I list them because I don't want people moving in and out or whatever else. These are the only permitted occupants. And if the occupancy is going to change, like let's just, I mean, even if it's an adoption, or maybe it's a child from another marriage that now is going to come live with them or whatever, I need that information. I need to update the lease agreement. They need to get approval of that, because let's say it's a 2-bedroom and now they have 5 people in there. That exceeds the occupancy limit. That's a lease violation. We can't do that. We're going to have to figure something else out. Of course, I'm going to try to find something else. I mean, I don't want to lose a good resident over something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this keeps the other side of that to where people are trying to move people in, that shouldn't be there, that you don't want there. You want to make sure that they're talking to you about that. You want to know who's living in your home. Okay, utilities. This section, of course, is just going to outline who's responsible for what utilities. With most single-family homes, the tenant's responsible. If that's the case, just X down on each of these lines. If you as a landlord do pay into the utilities, mark it. If it is, maybe it's a duplex and you pay for water and trash. Okay, well, mark water and trash for owner. Electricity and gas is on the tenant. If there's any other thing here that you're paying for them or they need to pay, whether it's cable, HOA, I don't know, whatever the case may be, write it in here and let them know who's responsible for that. These next couple line items are really geared around renter's insurance and personal property. So I require renter's insurance for all the property. It's also outlined in the screening criteria as well. And I want to reinforce that if anything happens to their personal property, I am not responsible for paying for it. And that is what renter's insurance does. Now, this is some pretty basic language here. When I got to Arizona and got back into the multifamily side of things, one of the things that I really liked is, at least with this one company, and there's other companies that do this too, but this one I worked with was E-Premium, I believe it was, and what they offered the landlord was a policy that covered damages that may be caused by the tenant that the renter's insurance policy would normally cover, but it didn't cover the tenant's personal property, and they would charge us $20-$25 a unit, something like that. So when we would require this, we would put verbiage right in here that would say, you're required to maintain renter's insurance, and if there's a lapse, we are going to automatically apply this landlord policy to your account, and you're going to pay $50 a month as a fee for not having your renter's insurance as required. Well, the thing is most renter's insurance was $20 or $30, so they're paying almost double the amount of money that they would by just having a renter's insurance policy, and in that landlord policy doesn't cover any of their content. So it does a couple things. It is a deterrent. 2, it gets them moving a lot quicker. If they know they're paying $50 for something they could be paying $20 or $30 for, they move to get that resolved a lot quicker. And then if anything happens in the meantime while there is a lapse, let's say a kitchen fire, that if it was caused by the tenant, a lot of times that'll be covered by the renter's insurance policy. Well, now you have this additional policy that's being charged to their account that will take care of that for you, and it doesn't hit your main policy. And the reason that's important is because think about your deductible. Now, apartment communities, the deductible is a lot higher than what a single family is, but you don't want to hitting your regular insurance, because one, you got to pay that deductible, which is usually a little higher. You don't want that on your loss history, your loss runs. And so this policy would kick in and would take care of those things that the renter's insurance policy would normally do. But more than anything, it was a deterrent and motivation for them to get their renter's insurance popped back on as soon as possible. Okay, so lawn care and exterior upkeep. If it's a house, this is just going over the terms where they're responsible for any of the upkeep, and if they don't, then they can be held responsible for it. You can go over there and take care of it. You can charge them. Use of premises. This is basically a subletting provision. I don't allow subletting. The other thing too, and although this is a much lower charge than what I would charge or recommend you charging today, is especially for homes that are near college situations perhaps or students, is those oftentimes have roommate swaps, and they'll be like, oh, this person moved out, I want to move this other person in. Okay, well, look, you have to screen the person, you have to prepare the paperwork, you have to get signatures from the old person, you have to figure out what to do with the security deposit, how much, do you have to give back to this person? I mean, the point is, it's a real pain. So this says 50, I would charge even more than that. I charge $200-$300, and because I've had situations where I'd have a roommate swap people out 3-4 times in the course of a year. Fine, if you want to pay me $500 a shop, okay, not a problem. I'll do the paperwork for that, but I'm not going to do it for free, and I'm not going to continue to do it. Although you did want to make sure that you screened the people living in your home and you had them responsible, just because it's easier for you to do what you need to do. Let's see what else. Oh, this also talks about one. Well, I said it can't be sublet, but you can't use this for commercial business purposes either. You don't want somebody running a auto repair shop out of your rental and having all that traffic coming in and out, and then of course all the damage to the garage from the oil and the work and everything else that would occur to that. So that outlines that it cannot be a commercial establishment. Okay, maintenance. Tenant agrees to notify management of any and all maintenance repairs. No additions or improvements may be made without the written permission of the manager or owner, landlord. In the event that it is determined that the tenant is responsible for causing damages, they will be charged back the cost of the damages. This is when we talk about the quarterly inspections, which, let's see, yeah, that'll be coming up. This is why I like the quarterly inspections. You go in, and if the blinds are damaged, I'll fix them. I'll replace them, and I'll charge them right then and there, because if they're not going to pay me for them, I'll get them out. What I don't want to do is let that stuff build up over the course of a year. The security deposit may or may not cover it, but regardless, it's going to be a lot more difficult to deal with at the end of the lease. So I'll do it right then and there. Plus what that does is it makes them think twice about letting damages happen again, or if something does get damaged, they go on and fix it before my next quarterly inspection, because they know that that's going to happen. So they just get it taken care of. Let's see. I have an entry clause in here. Now, each state's going to be a little different, but it's usually 24 to 48 hours is considered reasonable notice. Some states, a lot of states, they don't actually give an actual number, but there's some general assumptions of what is considered reasonable, and that's usually 24 to 48 hours. Now, if it's an emergency, a threat to human life, or a threat to damage to the property, you have the right to enter. You don't have to do that. Of course, be careful about forcing yourself into enter. You don't want to stick yourself in a dangerous situation. Now, if you give notice to vacate, a notice to enter, and they don't let you in, that's a lease violation. You give them your 1430 or whatever your lease violation notice is, and then you do it again. And then if they don't do it, if they won't let you in again for a second time, see you later. With reasonable notice, as a landlord, as a property owner, you have the right to enter that home and do what you need to do there. Now, it's not to harass them. It's not to play games or make their life difficult. If there's legitimate reasons for it to go in there for repairs, or if you have to get a vendor in there, or if you have insurance inspections or whatever else, if you're selling the home, if you plan on putting it on the market, that's one that I saw here recently in one of our groups. They scheduled a move-in, or scheduled a tour, gave notice. Everybody showed up day of, tenant refused to let them in. Okay, lease violation. If they do that again, you're going to go on and proceed with an eviction. Yeah, are they going to be out within 60 to 90 days anyway because they're at the end of their lease and you're going to sell the home? Yeah, but you need to be able to get that person in, and they do not want to end this relationship with an eviction on their record. So it's a way to enforce that. You have the right to enter your home with reasonable notice. Okay, this next section is just going over rules and regulations. again, these are some pretty standard ones. I don't like satellites on the house. I don't like them attached to the house. I don't like them attached to the roof, any of those things. This talks about, antennas and video devices. Again, not without written permission. So if you're okay with a satellite on there, it's fine, but make sure it's always with written consent from you, because if they slap one up on there that you may say they can have a satellite, but they have to have it in the bucket in this area. And if they put it on your house without written permission, it's a lease violation. They have, again, I keep saying 14 days to remove it, because that is it's a state of Kansas thing. That's what we're kind of looking at as kind of a state of Kansas template. Your state will be potentially different on how many days they have the right to. Some of them are 10 days, some of them are 7. Know your state laws on that. But they have their time period they have to get that removed. If they don't, then that's 30 days to go on and get out. No decorating or alterations. You don't want different color paints on there without your permission. You don't want them updating the different blinds and taking yours down and getting rid of them without permission. No alterations, any of those things. Locks. Locks may not be changed except by the owner. If they change them, they need to give you a key immediately for everything. You need to test it. You need to let them know that doesn't happen again without your written permission. You need to have access to that home at any given time. That includes alarm codes or whatever else. If you're going to put an alarm on it, that's fine, but you need to know what that code is. You need to have access in case of an emergency. No ifs, ands, and buts. Noise disturbances. This is a good one to have, and especially because you would think this is just apartments, and this does say apartment on there, but we just ran into a situation with somebody in one of the groups and the clients that we were working with, to where it was a landlord who rented to a mother and a younger child, I think 3, 4, 5 years old, and the neighbor started filing complaints. It was a row house that shared a wall, and the landlord was not the owner of the neighbor's home. That was the owner-occupant. The child would have temper tantrums and scream profusely throughout the day. And the landlord was trying to figure out how to address that, because it wasn't necessarily violating a noise order, but it was disturbing their peace and quiet of the neighbor. So this policy here doesn't necessarily hit with that, but it does say, may not permit or disturb any noise in the dwelling, any of your guests, interfere with the rights and comforts of any other resident or neighbor. And then I always pop in there what the kind of noise ordinances are. Like, so for that city, if the noise ordinances are after 10 and between 10 and 7, no disturbing noises. That way, if police are called, you can then use that as a lease violation as well. But it's good to kind of have that outlined. NSF fees, oral agreements, just saying, hey, everything on here, everything is going to be in writing. There's not going to be an oral agreement between us. Everything we do is going to be writing. Replacement, if they come to get a replacement key from me, I'm going to charge them $15. And they'll say, yeah, a key only costs $2.50 or whatever it is these days. But yeah, I had to go get copies of that made. It cost me my time. It's $15 or $20 or $25, or I'd say $50, bump it up. You really don't, you want to make these things deterrents. You don't want to get in the practice of this, because it's just a pain. Let's see here. Screens and windows, you don't want those removed except for cleaning. You don't want them putting any aluminum foil, especially in the windows or anything covering it. You don't want, inappropriate like wall cloth banners that sometimes you see teens. Sometimes I've seen those in windows, and it just makes the home look bad. You don't want that. Let's see here. Storage. Resident assumes all risk and damage or loss of any property stored in any storage area or locker. Again, this is probably talking more about an apartment, but this can apply to sheds as well. Because again, sheds, usually you're not in and out of a lot. So, if it does get wet in there and the resident doesn't know and it ruins all their stuff in there, that's on them. That's not your responsibility, and that's what that's saying. That's what the renter's insurance is for. Surrender. At the time of surrender of the premises, the tenant shall return the keys to the owner and agrees that premises will be surrendered in the same condition as it was found. So this is me basically just saying, hey, I want this back in move-in condition, minus wear and tear. And it also outlines that the acceptance or the return of the keys is the return of the possession to me of this home, and that's when they stop being responsible, assuming that they're out of the lease. And that also they are responsible for any damages that they or their guests cause. That's hit in 2 or 3 different sections throughout the lease as well. Just hitting them one more time. The utilities resident is required to transfer all utilities into resident's name for the entire term of the lease. Additional provisions. Again, if there's anything that isn't covered in here that you want to work out a deal or anything special, if you're saying, yes, I have no problem if you paint the southeast wall this specific shade of gray as an accent wall as part of your condition to move in, then write it here or on a separate piece of paper and have them sign off on it as an addendum. Again, point being is that everything's in writing, nothing verbal. Of course, get their signatures, and do not sign this until you get all of the move-in paperwork back with their signatures on, because what you don't want is to give them a signed copy of this lease and then they can just start changing what they want to, sign it and say, oh, this is my lease agreement, the landlord even signed it. You don't want that to happen. So make sure you get all the signatures, you review it, make sure there's no alterations, and once you're satisfied that everything is on the up and up, you sign it, and there you go. Okay, so that is the residential lease agreement. I know there was a lot there. This is a very important document, and these are important standard components of a lease agreement. That's why I really kind of wanted to take a dive into them. In the next session, what we're going to do is we're going to start getting into some of the standard addendums. I'm not going to cover everything. We got a lot of addendums that you have access to. And the addendums are just things that aren't necessarily covered in a lease agreement that you want to deal with specifically. You know, like the animal agreement would be one. Swimming pool, maybe, if you had a swimming pool. You'll see there's a drug-free, crime-free, pest control. You know, the reason I don't necessarily do pest control in my lease agreement, because sometimes I'll use this lease for a house and sometimes I use it for an apartment, and I have different pest control policies based on what type of dwelling that you're in. So that may be one reason why you would use an addendum. But I think that we are at a good stopping point. We are just at an hour. So yeah, great stopping point for now with this particular session. So when we return, we will jump into some of the addendums and we will wrap up the move-in process for this course, the Landlord launch. Again, make sure to join us if you have any questions. Join us for our weekly Q&A. Well, if you don't have any questions, join us anyway. You never know what you're going to learn by other people asking questions as well. That's it. That's what I got. I'll wrap it up and let you get back with your day and your evening. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.